Hey everybody, how's it going? So today we're going to do a Fusion quickish tip on joints and assemblies and all that good stuff. So I'm working on a project for a customer, so I've got a little piece of this project in here, and I had to do some parts that moved around and interacted with each other. So I thought maybe a good opportunity to at least touch on joints and assemblies a little bit. So I've basically just got three parts here that I'm working with. So this is we'll call this the base, or this lower lid. I've got this rack, and I've got this this gear piece here. And so if we look at the bottom, so essentially the idea here is that this rack is going to slide back and forth, and as it does, it's going to move this around. So this is a Scotch yoke mechanism, and it's basically, so there'll be a button here that pushes. And then a spring on this side. So basically, as you push in, it'll spring back, and as you do that, it will rotate this gear around the teeth. And so basically, right, the Scotch yoke just moves back and forth, but your gear always moves in the same direction. And so, so here's what we're going to do. So I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of like how to build parts, and there's lots of videos on that. I'm just going to kind of go through the steps on how you'd start building some assemblies and some joints, and how you'd make these things interact with each other. So it's a very cool feature set that Fusion has. So first thing I'm going to do is I've got this main lower lid, and I'm going to call that my base. And I want to make sure that this is grounded. So when you're grounding it, you're basically saying keep it still, don't let it move. So when these things are moving around, so if you're pulling this back and forth, well, you don't want your grounded part to move. You just want this part to move, and then in turn move this. So we're going to ground your base part first. And all these things need to be components, by the way. You can't necessarily just do bodies. You need to have them down here as components. So if you do have a part that you want to change to a component, it's real easy. You right click, you say create components from bodies, bang, you're done. Okay. But that's sort of the table stakes as far as doing assemblies and joints and things like that. So if we find our piece here, this lower lid, we're going to right click first, and we're going to say ground that. So now he's grounded, and you can see the little thumbtack there. The thumbtack means he's grounded. Okay, you're grounded. And then we have the rack, and then we have the gear. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually hide this rack for a second. So this is going to be a revolving type joint, right? And so it is going to be revolving in relationship to the hole that it sits in here in this base part. So what you're going to do is you're going to go up here to assemble, and we're going to say I'm going to do an as-built joint. So the difference being is that you can say, hey, make a joint. So a regular joint means move this part at that part, and here's the motion I want you to do. An as-built joint means, well, I've got these two parts in their relative position where they're going to be. So just build the joint as it is in the position that it's in. Don't bother moving stuff into the right position for me, because I've already done it. So in this case, I'm doing an as-built joint. And so you can see over here, it's saying, well, select your components. So this is my component, and this is my other component. And you can see by default here, it's trying to do a slider. I'm sorry, let's do position first. So it's saying, what position do we want to do? So I'm going to, I'll change this to a revolute. And the position in this case is the axis that I want this thing to revolve around. So I'm going to pick this center point. So you can see it's revolving in a very odd way. So you can see here it's saying, well, which axis do you want me to revolve around? So if I do X, it's already on the X. Let's try Y. No, that don't seem right. Let's try Z. There we go. So that's the position that I'm okay with doing, is I want it to revolve on the C. I want it to rotate on the C. And you can click the animate button and let it go around and around and around. Okay, so that's what I want to do. And now let's bring our rack back in here. And so the next thing we're going to do is actually make this rack slide back and forth. So we're going to do another as-built joint. We're going to select this component, and this time the base is my component, because these little posts, it's basically going to slide in these little arms that stick up from the base, but it's all still part of the base. So I'll pick that, and now it's asking me for the position. And so what I want to do actually is make sure that this face is sliding relative to the opposite face, so that it's moving, parallel or perpendicular, I guess, depending on how you're looking at it, to the base part. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the rack, and I'm going to say the position is here. And so let's bring the rack in. And so it's no longer a revolute. Now we're going to do a slider. So again, right, we're sliding on the wrong axis. It's sliding back and forth. I want it to slide this way. So let's try it across the Y, and there we go. So now it's moving back and forth in the position I want. So now if we go back to home, and actually if we orient this to the top, and if I start to move this, well, it's moving correctly, and this guy's moving correctly, but they're not talking to each other, right? They're moving independently. It's like, one's invisible, or, one's a ghost. So let's go back here to position. I'm going to say revert my position back to the original. And now what we need to do is enable some contact sets. So if you go to assemble, and you want to say enable contact sets. Now, second step is you need to define some contact sets. So this is going to be pretty simple. You go to new contact set, and you just pick the components that are going to be interacting with each other. So I'm going to pick the slider, and I'm going to pick the gear, and I'm going to hit OK. So now those two things, we're calling them contact sets. So when those two components make contact, it is saying, do something to the other one. So now if we come back here and we move this, now you can see as I rotate, it's moving the gear back and forth. And this is a pretty slow computer, so it's going to have a hard time keeping up. But I think you get the point. And so if you want to capture your current position, you just hit the capture button, and basically what that does is keep all of your parts where they are right now. Or you can say no revert. And where that's useful is in if you need to capture some measurements. So I need to be able to say, okay, well, when this guy is moving all the way to its farthest left, so right there, I need to understand what this distance is. So I can say capture that position. And then I can snap a measurement. And then I can move it back this way. Let's come back. So that's the farthest position that way, so I can say capture that position. So then if I'm messing around and I do something and I want to go back to where it was, obviously that's all wrong, then now I can say revert, and it'll put me back to the last position. So there you go. This is a quick tip, so I'm not going to go into great detail, but building assemblies is pretty easy. Like I said, the first thing you want to make sure you do is make sure they're all components, for one. Ground your base component first, so that that's not moving in relationship to your other stuff. It's grounded. Build your joints like I did, as built joints, and then define your contact sets. And then those are the basics to really start. And it's very powerful. You can do a lot of stuff with it. There's a lot of cool joints too. So there you go. There's your quick tip. Go have fun with it.